we are constantly pivoting and finding opportunities where, before you'd say, oh, well, we thought we were going to launch in retail and now we can. It's like, okay, but what can we do? So I'm often asking that question, what can we do?
So welcome, Karuna, to Owning Your Legacy, and thank you so much for joining me today. Really nice to have you here in person.
Thank you, Laurette. It's great to be here.
So I would love you, for our listeners, to kind of just tell us your story.
So I actually have been a food lover and in the food business forever. So I started my career actually in B&G at Procter & Gamble. Many, many years ago. And interestingly, it was in the food division. So this was way back when P&G actually had food brands.
Right.
So the very first brand I worked on was Jif Peanut Butter, which is like one of the most iconic brands to work on. It was an amazing experience, and then went on to work on Folgers and Duncan Hines and a number of other P&G brands. And I think that's where I kind of found my love for both marketing and for food. And so from there, went on to run my own company, consulting for a while in food innovation and brand strategy, and kind of, again, ended up working with a lot of food companies because that's been sort of the common thread. And that led me actually to land on the agency side. So I'd kind of learned about left brain marketing, I would say, at Procter & Gamble and the analytical side. And I was really interested in understanding more about the creative side. So I went to Leo Burnett here in Chicago, and was there for, what I thought would be a little stint to kind of learn the marketing, creative side of marketing. Ended up being 9 years, which was, and I got to work on some amazing campaigns, but interestingly, a lot of food and beverage again. And, really got more and more interested in doing some innovation work and working with companies that were trying to do more innovation. So when I decided it was time to kind of go back to the client side, I started really looking in the innovation space, and that led me to startups. And there were a lot of interesting things happening, especially here in Chicago, because there's so many food companies based here. But I realized that, what the thing that really was fun for me was the chance to build something, really something from scratch. And that's kind of what I've done. Even though I've worked for large companies, I always sort of gravitated to those roles where I got the chance to do something that didn't exist before. And, just my own values and purpose were all around, eating more sustainably, eating healthier. I've been a lifelong vegetarian and had done a lot of work in the innovation and sustainability and health and wellness space. So those things kind of came together, and this opportunity where I am currently, which is a startup called Nature's Fynd, just sort of showed up one day, and I thought, well, this sounds like science fiction. But the more I learned about it, the more interested I became. And I took what was probably a pretty big risk to jump into something very early. But it was the opportunity to, build something, a brand, and build a new category from scratch, just blank sheet of paper, as our CEO told me. Yeah. And that was just too good an opportunity to pass up. So that's kind of how I ended up here. I've been here for 4 years now.
That's great. And I really want to get into Nature's Fynd a lot. Yeah. But before we go there, I would love you to talk about, we talked about this a little before recording, that I learned about the Like a Girl campaign. I think I'd love you to expand on that and talk about how it evolved and just, what you loved about it. And I think I was saying, I was watching that, doing some research on you, and it made me teary-eyed. It's such a good campaign, and I think it's still relevant.
You just hit on one of my favorite highlights of my career. So this was while I was at Leo Burnett. Interestingly, at the time, I was actually running ARC, which is the shopper and e-commerce agency. So I was president and global chief strategy officer, and out of the blue, I got a call from our CEO, global CEO for Leo Burnett, and said, I need your help, kind of on top of your day job. We need your help on an Always campaign. And I thought, okay. And having worked at P&G, obviously I knew a lot of the clients, and so had been, doing strategy for a long time. And he said, I want to put together a team of our, best strategist and our best creative director. And so I got thrown into there was 3 of us, literally. Wow. A creative director from Toronto who I'd never worked with before. We ended up becoming best of friends. And in fact, the entire team ended up being all women, which was very cool. So my job as a strategist was really, as Judy, the creative director, used to say, your job is to set the table so the creative, which is the dinner, can be served, right?
Yes.
So So I started just, I obviously knew a little bit about the category, but interestingly, both Judy and I had daughters right around the age about, just at that point where we were starting to see that change, so around 10, 12, and we were seeing this change in confidence. And what was really interesting is as the more we talked about it and the more we started saying, wow, gosh, how do you keep them confident? And as you start to kind of think about that human truth of what happens to girls at puberty, and you also, we started to look at what was true about the brand. The brand had always been very critical at that moment, right? And also a brand that actually was doing a tremendous amount of education and work globally. All of that good stuff was happening, but it was kind of bringing together this human truth about girls losing their confidence, literally twice as much as boys. And, it takes forever for us to get it back. So
if we ever,
right?
Yes.
But it's pretty, you and I are not there yet.
Yes.
So it's pretty late in life. So if you can do anything to mitigate that, as we were looking at our own daughter, so it kind of became a personal connection too. So as we uncovered this data and got to this insight
is there
around.
any data around, sorry to interrupt you,
Yep.
but any data around hormones, and is that why it happens, this lack of confidence?
It is, I think it's because there's so much change happening, right? And the things and society starts to put all these different expectations on you, right? Girls are supposed to, girls should and shouldn't and all those things. So we started to look at exactly what you just asked, like what are all the things that are creating this situation? And one of the big things was the language we use in society, the things we say without even thinking about it. And what was interesting is it's not just men saying it or others saying it. It was also, we were saying it to ourselves as women. And so that was the big aha for us. It was like, if we actually asked a 10-year-old girl, or a 4-year-old girl or a 6-year-old girl, they feel like they can conquer the world, and then something happens and it changes.
Right. And that's
right?
the beauty of this campaign for
Yep.
listeners that maybe haven't seen it. You got to go look at it. But they said they're asking these young girls, run like a girl. And the little girls are running their heart out.
Yep.
And then when that switch happens, they start running like a girl and flinging their arms. And it was amazing to watch that.
And it was just this notion of, why is like a girl an insult? How do we turn that around to be something that's a powerful affirmation? And you see that transformation. So the beauty of this, and believe me, it was not an easy thing to sell to a client. We don't introduce the brand until the very end.
Yes.
It's almost a 3-minute film. And no one believed. In fact, it was amazing because initially, it was just launched in the U.S. And then literally over the weekend when we aired it, we started seeing the number of views just climb, and it was being shared globally, and it just took off. And then all of a sudden, we got the call from the CMO of P&G, and he's like, okay, we need, this is amazing. We need to put more behind it. And it grew organically, and it just became something that none of us could imagine. So when you work on, our job, when I took that assignment, was really, we got to turn around this business and create a campaign that's going to do that. And so that's kind of where we were. And all of a sudden we looked at each other and we're like, this thing is taking off. And, you hope in your life to do something that has that kind of impact. And to this day, and it's been, almost 10 years, I still have people come up to me and say, oh my God, I know, that campaign. And so it's had a amazing impact, which is, again, the thing that you always
and like
hope
I said,
for.
still so relevant, sadly, in a way,
Yes,
but it is. Did
And
it change how you parented your daughters?
Yeah, I think I became much more conscious of the language, we all use without thinking about it. And it really does make a difference. And the brand actually went on. I mean, I didn't work on subsequent iterations of the campaign, but I think they had a lot more data around the fact that, girls who participate in sports are actually, able to maintain some of that confidence. And so there were all these different iterations of different things in society that are impacting how girls, feel about themselves, and how do we make those go away so girls can be confident. But yeah, that little 4-year-old you see running her heart out, I mean, that's an image that stays with everybody.
Yeah, that was really powerful stuff. And I was telling you, so I'm on the Female Strong board, and it's really about that same age group. It starts at 6th grade. This goes through seniors in high school of coming up with their own business and pitching it to a Shark Tank at the end of their 12-week period of classes in entrepreneurship, and watching them present to the Shark Tank, and the confidence is so cool. And the moms that come up to you and dads, and like, my daughter looked forward to Wednesdays to go to class. It was like Wednesday night classes, and got them out of bed and got them excited. And the cohort, I think that's part of it too for young girls, is having a sanctuary
Yes.
where they can feel safe and strong and confident. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so that's very
Absolutely.
cool stuff. So, okay, let's move on to Nature's Find, which is very, very interesting. So I think you got to tell our listeners about how you found it, because I love that story.
So Nature's Find, and the name didn't even exist when I joined, so that was one of the things I worked on. But our company actually started as a research project for NASA.
That's so cool.
Our chief science officer, when he was a graduate student at Montana State, was doing some NASA-backed research. And what they were trying to understand is what kind of conditions would need to be true for life to thrive outside of Earth. Obviously, for NASA, it's very relevant, but that journey actually took them to one of the most unique ecosystems here on Earth, which is Yellowstone National Park.
Wow.
And believe it or not, in the volcanic springs of Yellowstone National Park, they discovered a fungi. So this is a microbial life form, which is not a plant, not an animal, a fungi. So part of the same kingdom as mushrooms. It's not a mushroom, but it's kind of what we call the third kingdom.
Okay.
And as they studied the fungi, it turned out to be pretty remarkable. So it is 50% protein, 30% fiber, has vitamins and minerals, and most importantly for our planet today, it grows and has been thriving in a very, very extreme ecosystem. So it has learned to adapt and do more with less, which as you kind of think about where we are as humanity on this planet, we need to learn how to do more with less. We're using up all of our land and water to grow crops that we feed to animals. And with climate change, we are looking at, real challenges as our population continues to grow. And one of the things that we really need is protein. So, again, back to the scientists who were studying the fungi, the next step then was, well, how can we grow this? So literally they invented a new fermentation technology. It's totally breakthrough. It's patented. It's something no one else is doing. And so we're able to grow protein in a matter of days in a tray-based system, like right here in Chicago, like 10 minutes from downtown. And we're able to do that in a way that uses 99% less land, 99% less water, and emits only 6% of the greenhouse gas emissions. Wow. So as you start to think about the need for protein globally, it's going to be in places like Asia and Africa. And how do we grow protein in those places? And the cool thing about our technology is we can do it anywhere. We can do it 365 days a year. Doesn't matter if it's raining or cloudy or, the sun is shining or not, because we can do it indoors. We never have to go back to Yellowstone. So kind of think about it as a sourdough starter. So we took a tiny sample and it just continues to grow. So we are able to make a pretty significant impact if we can do this and scale it to be able to grow protein for the world, which is going to be probably one of the most important needs we'll have. And we're running out of land and water. So we have to find new ways to do that. So that's what this company's doing. And I think I told you earlier, I'm married to a scientist.
Yes.
And so I had him check it out before I decided to take this leap. Because when you first hear it, you're like, wow, this is like science fiction. But as a marketer, I mean, you can't ask for a better story, right? You've got NASA, Yellowstone, saving the world, sustainable food. And it always, I mean, you have kids, so you'll appreciate this. When I first heard about it, I was like, this is like Toy Story. This is Buzz and Woody coming together, right? So you need science and you need nature, and it's the idea that the two can coexist
and solve problems. I love
solve problems. Yeah,
philosophy
so that's
on that. I think expand on that. I love the concept of the solutions are there.
Yeah. So I think when I first joined, my job was to help build a brand, right? And I said the first thing we're going to do is really start with what do we believe, what's our purpose, what's our mission, what are our values as a company. And then I'm going to go build a brand, because all those things have to be grounded for us to build a brand that actually tells our story in the way that we want, both externally and internally. Authentically, exactly. So a lot of where we started was this idea that we believe scientific curiosity and human ingenuity coming together can help solve some of our planet's biggest challenges. And that's literally what we're doing. We're trying to bring those forces together to help solve what is going to be humanity's greatest need, which is food. How do we feed 10 billion people in a world that's challenged by climate change is really what we're after. So our mission is really around creating these amazing foods that both nourish people and nurture the planet. And how do we do that? And so
That's food hero stuff.
It is food hero stuff. And as a storyteller, a brand builder, and a marketer, I couldn't ask for a better place to start because it is a story that captures everybody's imagination. And, one of the things I've learned being in marketing and food marketing in particular, and you know this, food is such an emotional thing for people, right? Like one of the things I loved about being in food marketing from day one was it is so complicated. Trying to figure out what people are willing to eat and won't eat and will try and won't try. It's always fascinated me because it's all about understanding, people and their human emotional reactions. Right. It's tied up in culture. It's nostalgia. It's all of those things. So trying to bring a brand new food that people have never thought about into
tell
the
us
world.
About the insights that you learned at the beginning. I think testing it out with some consumers, that was probably interesting.
It was fascinating. So one of the first things after we did kind of the building the brand, the next thing we did was really around consumer insights, because what I wanted to figure out, and that was actually my first hire, I hired a head of consumer insights, and that is very atypical for a startup to invest in. But to me, it was like, the lesson I learned at P&G from day one was start with the consumer, understand the consumer. And so we got together what we believed was going to be our core consumer, which, tends to be a younger consumer, tends to be someone who's kind of on the plant-based journey, who understands the climate, the connection between climate change and the food they eat. And so we found people in different generations. So we did some of that work. But it was fascinating when we, and I love telling this story because, I said, okay, we're going to describe exactly what this is. So just like what I just shared with you, right? It's a fungi. We discovered it in Yellowstone, and we're making meatless and dairy-free foods. Would you like to try some?
Yes.
And I'll never forget. I've done research for over 25 years, and the moderator for the focus group pulled me aside and she said, "You can't go in there and explain this way. You've got the word fungi 3 times in here. People are going to freak out, and the research will be over." And I was like, you know what? If they're going to freak out, I better know now than after I spend all this time and money building a brand, right?
Exactly.
And she was like, "I'm telling you, this is not going to go well." I was like, "Just go in there and do it. Let's see what happens." And she starts to explain it, and consumers were like, "Wow, this is really cool. Tell me more." And I thought, wow, okay. So it was so interesting to see right up front, we could see that there was this emotional curiosity. Interest,
and not afraid of it.
Afraid of it, which was really a huge aha, because we had all come into this thinking this is going to be impossible, right? Once I had that sort of consumer foundation, I was like, okay, we got this. Yes. Now we know that there is something there. We have to find the right consumer. We have to obviously talk about it in the right way. But there's something there because this story about what this can do for us extends beyond the individual. And these were people who really got that. So if we can tell the bigger story, it almost doesn't matter what the food is. I mean, of course it matters, but you know what I'm saying?
Taste good, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
Yes.
But there's a bigger reason that people are excited about the brand. So coming out of that work, we created the name, and again, Nature's Fynd. So
Great
nature
name.
and Fynd. Fynd is all about discovery. Our brand is a brand of discovery.
Did that take a while to get that name, or did it?
Naming is one of the hardest things, and I've done a lot of it. And I will tell you, it's one of those where you can, go round and round in circles. And this was one of these. We had Fynd actually, but we were like, something's missing. And I woke up one morning, I was like writing it on the whiteboard, and I was like, nature. It needs nature. That's our story. So, and the Y is in there, and people think it's just to be clever, but it's actually for Yellowstone.
Yellowstone, that totally makes sense.
So it's, what we found in nature in Yellowstone. And when you tell that story, people really, again, get excited about it. And I've been to Yellowstone now, I think probably half a dozen times. And I'd never been until I started this job.
Really? I was going to ask you that.
And
Isn't
it's
it beautiful?
So amazing. And I've been in every season, and every time it's just more spectacular than the time before.
Too.
So we have a huge connection there. We still have a great connection to NASA. So I get to still work on these fun stories.
So is it on rocket ships now? I mean, is it truly being
So
used?
we actually launched on the SpaceX 25 back in July of last year. And it was to demonstrate whether we could grow Phi, the name of our protein is Phi, F-Y, out in space. And so actually we demonstrated that we could grow on the International Space Station. And so we sent a little protein factory up there. It's a tiny little cassette, and grew protein. And the properties are very similar to what we were able to grow on Earth, which is amazing because you have very different conditions up there.
Right.
And now, we're continuing to work with NASA to kind of, take that next step. So
That's awesome.
It's pretty exciting because as you think about, deep space travel, and you think about, going to Mars someday or whatever it is we might be doing, you cannot take a cow or a chicken with you. No. So you're going to have to figure out, and protein again is super important because when you're in that, environment, that's muscle is what most astronauts are losing. So to be able to grow something that they can then turn into a variety of foods is pretty
And it seems like a
spectacular.
lot of the plant-based foods, that's a challenge, is to get the protein there.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
definitely have a competitive advantage here, I would say.
Yeah, and I think the other thing from, for the meat-like products is we actually have inherently a natural texture. So it's a filamentous fungi, which literally means it grows in filaments. So unlike plant-based proteins where you're sort of extracting the protein in a powder form and then rehydrating it to create texture, we actually start with the texture. We just grow the mat as is and chop it up, and then we can make a sausage or a burger or whatever you want. And then if we break down the texture, which as you know is much easier to do, we're able to then create a milk-like product that we use to make all of our dairy products.
Cream cheese, and that's great that it can go both ways.
It is pretty amazing.
And talk about the journey to get it into Whole Foods. Like, I think that must have been an interesting journey.
It is. We're very proud and excited that we are there. So we're, nationally in Whole Foods now. But it was, I still laugh when I think about our first meeting with Whole Foods was in the first quarter of, I think it was like end of January, February, 2020. The follow-up meeting was in March, which didn't happen, and then got pushed to July. Obviously all retailers at that point were like, oh my God, we
Not
can't
doing
talk about
anything.
innovation.
Yeah.
We have to figure out if we
How
can
to
get
feed
toilet
people.
paper
Yes,
and
exactly.
tuna on the shelves, right? So that was a really interesting time, but we hung in there. And then and the buyers were all working from home, which, as you know, one of the big things when you present to retailers, you're there, you're sampling,
taste. Yep.
and that became really, really challenging. But we hung in there, and then in 2021, they agreed to take us into I think we were in 4 regions, and then after about 6 to 9 months, we just expanded nationally. So
And how's it going?
It's going great. We're just in the national rollout right now, but. A lot of excitement, I think, around what we're doing, and something that people are seeing as being truly new and innovative. I think that was the other challenge, right? As we went through COVID, the thing that really helped us is people became much more interested and connected to where their food was coming from.
Yes.
But you also saw this huge explosion of plant-based foods. And one of the decisions we made early on, kind of related to that story I told you about the focus group, is we were very deliberate in saying we could have easily ridden the plant-based wave. And that was a lot of the discussion early on. Like, should we just be plant-based? And we said, no, we're going to be unique. And I mean, I've spent a lot of time in retail and in CPG, and I knew the importance of being unique and differentiated, and that has actually been really important when we go talk to retailers. If you're another plant-based restaurant, they don't want to talk to you. And so we're able to, I think, have that conversation because we are bringing something that's not been done before and different.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit before about, I think you call it purpose washing. Is that right? Talk about that a little bit. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think, the thing that's become very vogue and trend right now is like everybody's, you're like, you have to find a purpose. Like, what's your purpose as a brand? And, I spent many years working on brands where it was like, okay, we're not exactly healthy or sustain. Like, how do we find a way to make ourselves,
Jif peanut butter. Even though it's really healthy.
It is
just
really
in moderation,
healthy,
of course.
But yeah, it's just, I think there are a lot of brands trying to figure out, I say sort of like, trying to, in hindsight, create purpose, right? The thing that I feel very fortunate is this was the first time where I could actually start with that, right? And build the brand from there. And that has made a huge difference because it's not just about the logo and the name, it's about everything we stand for. It's about our values. If you're really going to build an authentic brand that's purpose-driven, you have to start with true values, and the company has to reflect that.
Has that helped you in creating a team, I would imagine, too?
Absolutely. So, we really live by our, we have 6 values and we really live by them because that's
Do you
who
know
we
them
are.
off the top of your head? I don't want to. I don't want to call you out on that, but I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So it's be relentlessly curious. So our company really started with curiosity. Act with intention. Because sometimes you can be chasing things and not, forget why you're doing them. So the intentionality of everything we do, and we are a small company with limited resources, so that's super important. Bravely challenge convention is something that, again, we really think about a lot. It's important that we don't just accept, when we started, it was like, well, the same brand can't do both meatless and dairy-free. And we said, well, why not? Right? And we've gone on to prove that, that we can do it, because if you think about everything being the same as before, you're never going to innovate, right? So what is that? That's 3. Leading with diversity, is another one that's really important to us. So in everything we do, we want to make sure that we have diverse viewpoints. We, make sure that we are bringing people from all different experiences. So even in building my own team, I have people who come from big CPG, I have people who come from small agencies, I have people who've been entrepreneurs. So really trying to, and from different parts of the world and different world and life experiences, because I think it just creates an ability for us to attack really challenging problems with a lot of different viewpoints. I think the other value that I really, is close to my heart and something I believe in a lot is leave it better than you found it. And really, as you think about the mission for our company, that's really what we're all about. How do we take this planet that's going through so many challenges and leave it better by doing the work that we do? How do we take a food system that we know is, could be better, could be more accessible, could be healthier, could innovate more? How do we, contribute to that? But it's a value that we also carry forward in how we deal with each other in the company. If you join a meeting, are you actually leaving it better than you found it? Are you actually adding value? If you're going to participate in an event, how are you going to make that better? So it's a question and a commitment that we have to, the company, to our mission, but also to each other as a team that I think is super important.
That's really important.
And I saved the best for last, which is
good.
Always find a way. And it's so funny because we had that. And then when we landed on the name Fynd, it was like, so it's probably the thing we say most often in the company, which is when we have a challenging situation, it's like, we'll find a way. We'll find a way. We'll figure it out. And that's probably one of the most important things that is important to our company and the people that we hire is everything we're doing is new. Yeah. Whether it's in marketing, whether it's in technology, whether it's in manufacturing, it's all new. Wow. Like we're working with something that no one has worked with before. We're manufacturing something that hasn't been done in the way we're doing before. We're marketing something that the world hasn't really seen before. So we really look for people who have that incredible resilience, kind of like our microbe.
Yeah.
And always can find a way because it found a way to thrive in some pretty extreme conditions and volcanic springs. And we kind of think about ourselves the same way.
Was it hard to get FDA or any of the approvals? Was that a challenge or not too bad?
Well, I don't think it was so much a challenge as it was all happening right during COVID, right? Like timing for us was challenging. So March 16th, 2020 was when we were launching our brand. So that was we had a huge event planned with press, and I had like the governor, I had the mayor, I had 100 press people coming. And on March 13th in the afternoon, as we were watching the news, we were like, oh my God.
This isn't going to happen.
This isn't going to happen. I was like, oh, guys, we'll postpone it for a couple of weeks. We'll be back.
Right.
And then a couple of weeks later, it was like, this isn't happening.
It was.
So we had to get creative. And so this is a great example of finding a way. We said, okay, we're clearly not going to be able to do this the way we wanted. We went ahead and announced the brand. And then we decided, we took advantage of an opportunity where we knew Bill Gates, who's one of our investors, was going to be on 60 Minutes and talking about us. And we said, you know what? We are going to sell direct to consumer literally when the show 60 Minutes goes on that evening. And so we pulled it all together and we launched via D2C. We sold out in 24 hours. And it was another moment where we could show.
And validate.
validate. And then
It
that
might
was
have been
helpful.
a blessing in a way,
It was
right?
actually, it was great because then we could use that when we spoke to retailers and said, look, you don't have to just, I mean, like,
We sold out.
Yeah, we sold out. We have a waiting list, and we had
Probably
feedback
had- I
from
was gonna
consumers
say,
that
but
helped us
yes.
make our product, better. And so it was, again, like,
It was like a little trial, a little pilot.
yes, but we are doing that constantly. We are constantly pivoting and finding opportunities where, before you'd say, oh, well, we thought we were going to launch in retail and now we can. It's like, okay, but what can we do?
Right.
So I'm often asking that question, what can we do?
Yeah.
How can we make this happen?
And how is it getting buy-in from your stakeholders? I mean, has it been good to work with your board, and how's that been? Sounds
Yeah,
like they're
I've been-
very open and creative, and they let you run, which seems cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is my first startup, right? I've spent my entire career. I mean, I worked for companies that are 100,000 people plus.
That you probably had to go through a lot more bureaucracy to get accomplish what you wanted to do in some
So-
of those CPG companies.
It's so different. And I actually really enjoy working with our board. And I spent a lot of time getting to know the board before I took the role because I knew how important in a small company, the being aligned with the board and being able to have those conversations. And they've been great. Not that they don't, they push and they question and they,
Which is their job.
which is their job. And, and a lot of times they suggest, new ideas and so I feel like I have I spend quite a bit of time, presenting to the board, engaging with them. And I find it hugely beneficial because we're so close to it sometimes. And then what a great board does for you is they're able to have a little bit of that perspective. They're not there to run the business, but they can kind of offer an alternate point of view. Sometimes they're just introducing you to people or connections you may not have. So I've found it to be really enriching, and they always challenge me, which I think is a good thing.
Great.
Yeah.
That's funny. I was mentioned I went out with Christy Hefner for dinner last night, and my friend Mary Wagner, and they were both hammering me on, I need a board. So you are validating that conversation of, I have one, but I really need help with that. And those two are like all about that. And exactly.
Yeah, it does.
It helps you. And they do push you.
Yeah, it's very different. It's a different relationship than, when you're in corporate America and you're dealing with, of course I have a CEO and I have our, leadership team that I'm always enrolling. But being responsive to the board on helping them understand. And, a lot of them I don't think anybody on there is a marketer. So I bring a new and different skill set. So it's the
How
opportunity.
many are on your board? Like, is it?
I think we're at 7 right now.
Oh, that's not bad. I mean, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to deal
board.
with 20
yeah.
or.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yep.
So what do you think is the responsibility of us in the food industry and leaders right now in terms of what legacy we want to leave in this industry?
I think, I have 3 kids, and I know you have more than 3.
5. Few.
I think about them and their kids a lot as I think about the question you just asked, right? I think we all have a responsibility. There's a lot of things our generation didn't get right as I look at it. So I try to think about, how do we make this a better, more sustainable food system that can feed generations to come, and do it without damaging the earth to the extent that we have. And there are ways to do that. And I think, from my own standpoint as a marketer, one of the things that I know, marketers, and I believe in the good power of marketing, right?
Yes.
A lot of people look at marketing in a negative way. I grew up in P&G where it was all about a force for good.
Yes.
How do you make the world better? How do you make, help people? So all those things are pretty deep in my convictions about marketing. And I think if we can figure out how to, help people make change that, a lot of times they know, but it's hard. It's hard to make change. So part of our job is to give them, options, choices. And that's what I believe for the food system. I think, we have to give people choices that, not only are sustainable and healthy, but taste great, because you might get them to try it once because they think it's cool, but they're not going to come back. And, we know that, right? So how do we, do that? And I think my years at the agency kind of taught me the power of creativity to transform and change human behavior. I mean, creativity can do a lot to help people, change habits. So I think bringing that together and thinking about, how do I leave a world that's better for my kids and their kids is really kind of what drives me.
Who would you say is your biggest influence or mentor in your career?
I think a lot of them actually come from my early days at P&G. My very first I worked for some incredibly amazing leaders. who really taught me, like I said, that marketing can be a force for good. And also, that you can be an amazing business leader and be an amazing human. And it's funny as I think back to them, so Jim Stengel, who was my first boss at P&G, he's went on to become the CMO of Procter & Gamble. Lesson learned, the consumer is your boss. Like, start with the consumer. Sticks with me to this day. Actually just did a podcast with him not that long ago, so it came full circle, which was pretty cool.
I listened to it. That was good. That was a really good one.
And Chip Berg, who was my second boss at P&G, and he is now or just retired as CEO of Levi's. Pretty amazing guy who, again, taught me about, make the tough decisions. When they're right, you got to make them, whether that's people or your business.
When you said that, of course, it comes to people in my mind. Like, that's,
yeah.
And when it comes to your business and you have to make a people decision, that's the hardest stuff.
And then as I look, kind of beyond my, former bosses, mentors, et cetera, I look at a lot of powerful women leaders who inspire me. So Michelle Obama, Jacinda Ardern, women who are mothers, who are amazing leaders, who are inspiring, and who make it look easy, but who do it with compassion, and who are strong women, but are really helping make the world better.
So in your career, there was times when you had mothered, kind of didn't do it all at once, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So talk about that a little bit. I think that's good advice for young women.
Yeah. So I actually have done it all, right? So when I left P&G after 11 years, it felt like, I had 3 young kids under 6, and it was a lot, trying to be a marketing director, traveling, trying to be home for those, art mom moments, and, I was running myself ragged, and I kind of felt like, okay, I need to take a break. And, the advice I give women is you have to kind of figure out what's important to you, right? At each stage, different priorities, your priorities are going to shift. And for me at that point, it was really important. It was right after 9/11, actually. And I was like, you know what? I can't be on a plane running all around and missing these moments. I need to be here. And so I decided.
And it was a choice.
It was a choice.
I like the way you say it. Yeah. It's like, it was the want, not the guilt.
No.
I want to be here.
I want to be here, and I don't want to miss out on these moments. So even prior to that, I had been working part-time, and P&G had been incredibly generous in allowing me to take time off with each of my first 2 kids and to come back to work part-time. And I was sort of the poster child. I'd done every version of, 4 days a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 1 day from home. I had done it all, and they'd let me do all of that and still continue to progress. But I got to a point after 9/11 where I was like, it's too much. So I became a full-time stay-at-home mom. And
How was that transition? Wow.
It was not easy initially, but I came to love it. And before I knew it, I was running the PTO and running this and running that. And so it was, I was like busy again, but I
leading again.
Yes, loved those. I really loved that time. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And then I slowly sort of, as my youngest, got into, first grade, and I started consulting, and that kind of led, then I ended up forming my own company, which I thought I was going to do for a little while, turned into quite a few years. And then from there, I got this opportunity at Leo. And even at Leo, I negotiated. I wanted to work part-time because I said, I still want to be around for my little one. Right. She's still little, and I want to have that flexibility. So, I've done all of it, Laurette. I've done, awesome. Full-time working mom, part-time working mom, stay-at-home mom. And the thing I will say is they are all hard. They're just different, right? The trade-offs are different. And at different points in your career, different things are going to be right for you. Right. But looking back, I wouldn't trade any of it. I am, my kids are all grown now, and I look at them and, just this weekend, we were, the things they remember are those little moments when I was there. That's and so I wouldn't trade that for anything.
And they're probably so proud of you. I'm sure they're like,
I am very proud of them. They've turned out to be some amazing humans. So,
that is so good.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know your thoughts on, help, support. Like it is hard. I mean, there's no way around it. There's just so much that we have to accomplish. What would be advice on, I don't know, nannies, or what did you use to have as support? I had a girlfriend of mine who back in those days when we were going through this together said, outsource everything you can. I thought that was great. I'm a believer.
But I think it's really important though to figure out, and I think Christy said this in your podcast, figure out what gives you energy, right?
Yeah.
We sometimes confuse, like, it's like, oh, I'm so busy, I'm busy. But it's like, figure out the things that give you energy. And it's okay to be busy doing those things, right? And I figured out, I love to cook. That gives me energy. So I didn't outsource that.
Yeah.
I don't love cleaning. I did outsource that. So, and there were times when I
get
felt
no
like
joy from laundry.
Yeah, exactly.
Laundry doesn't do
No.
anything for me.
So I think really figuring out what's important. I enjoy, the work I do with some of the nonprofit boards I work with. So I probably take on too much, and I'm definitely guilty of that at every stage of my life. But I think figuring out what are the things that energize you and what are the things that, take energy away is important, and trying to manage that as opposed to managing time, I think is really valuable.
That's really good advice. I think that's true. And even in work,
Yeah,
figuring
that's
what,
the exact
what
same thing.
brings you joy.
Yeah.
How about in terms of, and I think, again, having 2 daughters, but your husband?
Yep.
I think picking that right person
Absolutely.
and that kind of support. So, what do you lean on there?
Yeah, I lean on him a lot. And honestly, when our kids were little, we have no family here in Chicago. And when we were both working in pretty high pressure jobs, there were literally times when he was traveling and I had to travel, and we had these 3 little ones. And so I had to fly my parents in. Wow. And after a while, I was like, this is crazy. But, we did what we needed to do. And I think he is, he has always been incredibly supportive of my career. And, at all different phases. When it was like, okay, you want to stay home? Okay, we'll figure this out on one income, right?
Great.
We needed to do that for a while. And then when it was time to go back, he's been incredibly supportive of every step of the way. So I think and he's had a lot of, because he's an academic, he has a lot of flexibility, which honestly, with no family, having that has been really, really helpful, because he's an equal partner all along, so it's, and we've both had pretty demanding careers. So the only way that can work is if both folks can give, or, a lot of my friends, and I have not, I've used a lot of help along the way too. I've had some amazing nannies, babysitters, family, you name it, neighbors, you rely on a lot. It takes a village. I'm a firm believer in that.
So Karuna, what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
I think for me, the biggest legacy is the 3 humans that I brought into the world. I feel like I look at them and I am incredibly proud of who they've become and what they're going to contribute to the world. So I feel like, first and foremost, I'm a mother first.
Yes.
And that is my biggest legacy. Beyond that, I think from a work standpoint, I am, I look back and I'm really happy at where I am right now, because it's a chance to make a difference, to, as we said, leave the world better than I found it. And hopefully, again, there's a lot of people working, I think, in the food system to try to make it better. And if I can help contribute towards that so that we create a more sustainable, more resilient food system for future generations, I feel like I will have done a little something and contributed in doing that, and really using the talents and skills that I have from a marketing and communications and standpoint to help people see that there are other options, there are other ways we can eat that can be just as joyful, but can be easier on our planet. So,
and you've got Like a Girl campaign too that you can't forget is already part of your legacy, because
Yes.
that is just amazing too. So that's really good. I think, we feed the world, all of us, and this. I think our industry is very intentional, and wants to do what's right.
Yep. Yeah. And I will close with, our tagline is always about feed your optimism. So we're here to feed your optimism, because we all want to believe that we can make the world a better place.
That's beautiful.